I'm delighted to be welcomed back by Konstantin from the Inside Russia channel. I think everyone will be familiar with his work. Many of you will have supported his work through, adding comments, liking, sharing, etc. And some of you will have supported his work and mine through Patreon, Buy Me Coffee, and all these other fantastic ways you can support creators. And I would say we're not just creators; we are more than that. We are fighting, I think, for an end to the war in Ukraine, and ultimately, I think thinking about what a future Russia could be, a better Russia, one that doesn't attack its neighbors, one that works towards the benefit of its citizens. Well, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's really good to be back. Thank you for inviting me. I keep following your channel. Fantastic. More and more people tune in to watch you. It shows that, well, your material is excellent and it's getting exposure. And I think you're absolutely right. We're not just creators. We're more than that. We tell the people the truth, what's going on in Russia, and hopefully that will make the difference.
And I think some of the audience understand, but many perhaps don't understand the risks that's taking on. I mean, you are taking a lot more risk than I am. Nonetheless, we're both challenging perhaps one of the most brutal dictatorships on earth. And Russia historically has had no compunction about harassing and worse those that seek to undermine its power and reach. So I think that's an important reminder for the audience there. And we're going to come to that later because we're not oligarchs, but there are oligarchs and sub-oligarchs and businessmen and even apparatchiks who are starting to meet with all sorts of mysterious accidents. Well, we'll come to that one in a minute. I think it's very indicative of where the Russian economy is at the moment. Let's start with Alaska and then the White House. No, I think you were quite surprised that Putin turned up to the summit, but turn up he did. I don't believe it was a double or a treble or, one of his numerous stand-ins. I think this was the real Putin. Um, but he was there. What were your impressions?
I also think it was real Putin there. A lot of people have been commenting on how that was a double. Even if it was a double, what difference does it make? It's the same thing, absolutely same thing. I was very surprised to learn that Putin actually would fly to Alaska and he flew. I know that how paranoid Putin usually is about his own personal safety. It is very known he doesn't meet world leaders face to face. He sits at a huge long table. He's afraid of the generals. He puts them, you know, 15 feet away from him. I don't remember if I don't know if you remember that picture of Emmanuel Macron came to visit him before the war.
I mean, they need loudspeakers, right, to hear
I
each other
know,
at the
I know.
different end.
It was just comical. So, and Vladimir Putin is rarely seen outside his bunker, right? And to fly to the USA, where he is not safe, anything can be done to him personally. At first, I thought that was a crazy idea, but then he must have been offered some kind of bulletproof guarantees, either from Donald Trump or from his team, or most likely from Donald Trump. So he made a decision to fly. So was I was very surprised.
I mean, there are many, many risks. I mean, one risk, of course, is that somehow the Ukrainians will get a team on the ground to take him out. I don't know what the optics of that would be. I mean, Trump wouldn't be particularly happy. But as you say, Putin is paranoid. He would be, I would say, highly suspicious of any food and drink supplied outside of his close core team. That in itself for him must be considered something of a risk. Um, So, as you say, yeah, he must have been fairly convinced that the accommodation would be secure, the food was secure, and the environment would be secure. Yes, it was held on a military base. I think that is not just symbolism. I think that also provides that additional layer of control, which he would have demanded.
Well, just being outside of Russia on a mission like that, who knows what his inner circle has, what kind of surprise they have for him. Who knows what Mikhail Mishustin has spoken with and aligned with. So I'm pretty sure Putin was still not at ease. But it was a very short mission, in and out. And USA and Russia, they have adjacent borders, so he didn't fly over any um, neutral waters, neutral territories.
And we'll come to what Putin wanted out of it, because I think he got out of that exactly what he wanted. Um, but there was another interesting angle. I did an episode which, I'd heard all of the coverage from Western commentators on what they thought, and what they thought of Trump, and what they thought of the optics of the meeting and how it was humiliating for Trump, etc., etc. But no one, absolutely no one, was really talking about what was being said in the Turbo Patriot community, the Z Patriot community. And of course, as usual, Michael Nucky did a rather good breakdown of what Gherkin and many others were saying. And I found it quite interesting because they weren't talking about Trump being humiliated. They were talking about it being a humiliation for Putin to go on American soil, Alaska, which had been Russian territory, and the fact that being on an American military base was another kind of humiliation. So the very different sort of perception of the event um, than perhaps we were thinking. Um, we were thinking it was a humiliation for our side, for the American side. Um, what was your impression? I mean, is this all another way that it's spun to the Russian public, or do the nationalist community genuinely think that this was a humiliating event for Putin to participate in?
Russian propaganda is absolutely best in the world. They certainly had a goal of broadcasting Putin's visit in a certain way, and they achieved that goal wonderfully. Not only I was monitoring how they were televising his visit live, but I also have monitored what happened after the visit, and they have been selling it as a huge victory. That kind of goes well with the May 9th parade event. Well, that was sold to Russia and Russian people and the world as Putin's victory because a victorious Russian army alongside with the North Koreans and the Chinese and troops from Myanmar and 27 leaders of countries big and small, including China and Brazil, came to shake Putin's hand, be his personal guest at the parade. So that definitely was sold as the victory. And this event, the peace summit in Alaska, was sold even as a bigger victory. Okay. So that was from the general public point of view. And from the point of view of the Z community, not all of them, because some they go along with the narrative of the Russian propaganda. And it's kind of easy to see that they tell what they are told to tell. Okay. But some, it's clear to see that they were very upset. And I think it's not just Z community. There's one big elephant in this room called Russia that no one ever talks about, and that is the Russian army. Okay. The leadership of the Russian army, the generals, um, they have their own opinions and they have real power of getting things done. Okay. How did it look from their point of view? I think kind of the same thing as the patriotic Z community. Um, for 3.5 years, Russians are being sold, have been sold this idea that the United States is the enemy, that Russia is not at war with Ukraine, rather than Ukraine is proxy. And the real war is going on with the West, the collective West, led by the USA. The USA is evil. The USA is the enemy. The USA is the NATO, okay? And USA has been supplying all kinds of weapons to Ukraine for the last 3 years. And all of a sudden, Vladimir Putin flies to the Lion's Den, you know, and that's right, to the military base, not just like a hotel or conference center or anchorage, to the military base. Moreover, he's humiliated by this Air Force parade. I loved it, by the way. I loved it. It was great. But I really give Donald Trump credit for that. He's brilliant. I don't know who came up with that, but I liked the idea. I liked how Putin was walking around the hardware, the planes. I liked the whole setup, and I liked when Donald Trump showed him, look, Vladimir, man, the bombers, bunker busting bombs fly, and he might as well fly to you. That was brilliant. But anyway, and I think from the point of view of Russian generals, the leadership of the Russian army, that was humiliating. Okay, and there's nothing you can do about that. But it was the show aimed not at them. It was the show aimed at Russian people and at the world, many world leaders. And the show was executed, was very successful, was executed brilliantly by Russians, by Vladimir Putin and his whatever, the servants, the propaganda, the reporters, his team. What can I add? It was a brilliant win for Putin, and it was a humiliation for American diplomacy. I'm not going to say anything about Donald Trump. That can be said. Nothing was expected of him, and he didn't do anything. So basically, but American diplomacy is definitely a huge fail.
So
Oliver?
I'm going to go through a couple of ideas of what I think Putin wanted to achieve, and I'd be really fascinated to hear if you sort of share some of those. I think the first one, he wanted to get the threat of these punitive sanctions that have been sort of talked about and the deadlines have been talked about. He wanted to get those lifted, and I think he absolutely achieved that. This also still seems to be in place despite the meeting of European leaders in Zelensky. So he's got that in the bag. No one is now talking about punitive sanctions. No one even is really talking about um, taking the secondary sanctions and putting them into a higher gear. And that's a shame because I think it's sanctions and secondary sanctions are the only things that could lead to the Russian war machine being stopped. Those deadlines and sanctions, that's all on hold. Then I think he also wanted to shift the perception that the war is all his fault and the continuation of the war is all his fault and that he's a barrier to peace. He wanted to shift that onto Zelensky and make Zelensky actually the difficult one. And I think Trump's already halfway there in the rhetoric he uses. Oh, I can deal with Putin because, of course, Putin flatters him, but it's so tough dealing with Zelensky. So he's already halfway there with that one. But I think when the Europeans come to the White House, they push back up on that one hard. So I think Putin's sort of halfway there, but he hasn't fully banked that advantage yet.
I absolutely agree. Before they were meeting in Alaska, I released a video where I explained my take on real secret reasons that Putin was going to Alaska. And basically, he wanted to land his feet on Alaskan soil. That would be enough. And then instead of bringing his main negotiator, Vladimir Medinsky, the guy who went to Istanbul 3 times as the head of Russian delegation. It would be only logical to bring him
Mhm.
because, say, he's in the subject of dealing with the Ukrainians. He's in the subject of peace negotiations, and he's the guy. Putin nominated him instead of bringing Medinsky. He brought Siluanov, the minister of finance.
Yes.
Come on, that's right there. That's his agenda right there. He brought Belousov,
Yes.
minister of defense, but then he's a nominal minister of defense. In a year and a half, was it? No, a year. It's been a year since he's been the minister of defense. He hasn't done one thing with the military. Okay, instead, he's a former Gosplan employee, and he's an economist. He's been in, that's his occupation. He was economic aid to Vladimir Putin for a very long time. That's who goes to Alaska. Um, Dmitriev, another money guy. So
Another
Putin,
money guy. This is
yeah,
important.
Putin brought the money people, economic officials or aides, advisors, and it showed clearly what he wanted to negotiate. If he wanted to negotiate peace, a ceasefire, peace agreement, anything about Ukraine, he would have brought a different team.
What he really
So,
wants to do is to get sanctions lifted. He wants to dangle the carrot in front of Trump to say, look, whether there's peace in Ukraine or not, here's some really juicy deals that we could seal, and just forget about all this, peace and justice stuff. Let's get on with making some money.
I agree. That could be this definitely that's what Putin wants. That's for sure. But hey, he was kicked out basically after 2.5 hours, and then he was not allowed to eat in the
Now, what's
in
your
the
take
U.S.
on
military
that?
base.
That's really interesting because they'd planned a whole meal. They printed programs for it because there were copies of that left on a photocopier. Actually, I now wonder whether that was done deliberately, just to underline the fact that yes, this meal was definitely going to happen, and we got rid of him. There's not much talked about that. Um, but also Trump's face seemed to be quite upbeat at the start and quite troubled by the end of the summit. What on earth was going on?
Well, Jonathan, I've been to many, many negotiations of different caliber. When I worked I was in the corporate world, and I've been to real high level negotiations. And what happened in Alaska, it usually happens when something goes wrong, not as planned. Okay, when you have an agenda for 6 or 7 hours and you have a meal scheduled, that's very symbolic. You can't, it's more than just a meal. People don't go there to eat. You got to understand, there's a different purpose. Okay, it's a sign, it's a symbol. It's time to talk informally and so forth. And then all of a sudden, the entire world knows that the Trump is so happy to announce the agenda, and the entire world knows that's gonna the meeting's gonna last for 6, 7 hours, perhaps even longer. And then it's going to be some kind of dinner or lunch or whatever. And then all of a sudden, 2 hours 45 minutes, and you see Russian delegation, coming into the conference room, and with the smiles on their faces, where they're so looking so happy, shining. Okay, and then Vladimir Putin comes out with a smile, and Trump comes with a, not such a happy face, and it just 2 hours 45 minutes and no meal, and Putin is out of the door. Basically, it just tells you that something went not as planned, not right. Okay.
What on earth
According
could
to
that
Putin and
be?
his
Yeah.
team, everything went well. I guess they achieved what they came there for. But I was so surprised because there was such a huge difference in between perceptions because I had two screens in front of me, one with Russian propaganda, Russia One, a broadcasting live, and another one with different American media. And the perception of this meeting was absolutely different. The Americans labeled it as peace summit, and word peace was, I think, mostly spoken. This word was spoken the most. Oh, it's a peace summit. It's a peace ceasefire. It's a peace negotiation. Peace this, peace that, peace here, and that's all about the peace. They're gonna make a deal. Donald Trump's gonna press them for a deal. That was kind of a mood. And Russians, they came in completely different mood. They came to hang out. There was no peace negotiations, no Ukraine. Ukraine wasn't mentioned once. By the propaganda, Putin mentioned it once in his speech, saying, "Oh, we're such wonderful countries and great president." Oh, you remember the press conference, right? And then just he said, "And we have to do something about Ukraine. We have to find some kind of resolution in this conflict in Ukraine." And that the previous administration is the reason why we attacked Ukraine in the first place. It wasn't for them, we would not never attack them. So,
That's
so
just flattering Trump's ego as well, isn't it? That's just another little political gift for him.
that's not just flattering ego. Anyway, the new paradigm of Russian propaganda, if it's the Democrats' fault, if it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for Biden, for Obama, that'd be peace between Russia and Ukraine. Okay, it's them. So I heard it so many times, I made notes, and then Putin said it. And they keep on repeating it now. Okay, and they basically keep repeating everything that was said right there in Alaska. And that's not just one-time event for Russian propaganda. It's going to be multiplied and talked about it for a very long time now. So the perception of Americans that Putin was so charged to come and negotiate the ceasefire and the peace deal, and then that's what they were talking about. And the Russians, they came to Alaska. Putin came to Alaska because he was invited as a guest of honor to reestablish relations with the United States of America. What peace negotiations? You know, oh yeah, we have a conflict with Ukraine, and yes, of course, that's also needs to be taken care of. But that's we came here for a different purpose. That was the message, informal message that I was receiving from everywhere. And then when the press conference was over, it's really hard to call it the press conference, right? It was just a couple statements made mostly by Putin and a short one by Donald Trump. And Putin was actually in charge of this event, right? So once it was over, the American reporters, I could even sense upsetting in their voices. They were saying, "What was that about? Where is the ceasefire? Where's the deal? The deal was not made. The deal, the sacred thing that." And then one of the guys, I think it was Newsmax Media or something like that. He couldn't hold his disappointment, and right there live he said, why did Putin come in the first place if he wasn't about to discuss? And I was thinking, oh my gosh, guys, you're probably in the wrong business. Okay, if you were reporting on this very extremely important event, you don't understand why Putin. We should have watched Inside Russia. Okay, because I
Yes.
explained everything right there, why Putin came in the first place. So that's my take. That's my take. Putin achieved. He scored a victory. Definitely, this victory is huge in Russia. They can't stop talking about it a few days after, and that's something that no one is talking about, Jonathan. Putin has been on tour de force. He has made numerous calls to different presidents in the coming days. Something I forecasted after he returned to Russia. He's been on the phone with all the presidents who are more or less, friendly to him and he speaks with. Okay, so that's he's discussed. I'm pretty sure he's discussed lots of things, and then he's used this situation to his advantage. I mean,
So
he
he's using
wrapped
it as
Donald Trump
collateral.
around his finger. You know,
Yeah. He's using it as sort of collateral to normalize his role on the global stage, to normalize Russia, and I guess he's using it as collateral um, to bind these sort of partners and allies and trading partners in um, to ensure that these secondary sanctions don't really bite. But it's a huge propaganda gift, isn't it? And this confidence you're talking about, that was on full show with Lavrov, who just sort of turns up in his SSSR shirt, which is absolute mockery. It's like, the Cold War is over, but we didn't lose it. And here we are, back again.
stronger than ever. Yeah, that's what his message. You know, boy,
I mean, the other
uh,
the other rumors, and these are pure rumors, because one of the other rumors is, well, what could have been mentioned behind closed doors? Was it just the absence of a deal, or was there something more to upset Trump? Um, and of course, the rumor is that the nuclear bombshell was dropped again, that once again they're using nuclear blackmail to avoid any consequences and to threaten Trump. And it does seem that Trump, just like Biden, is very susceptible to this nuclear blackmail threat. The other one, of course, is rather interesting. Now, we don't know whether this was even mentioned or hinted at all, but Trump has got a few issues with the Epstein problem, and whatever data or dirt may exist. Now, there are rumors that Mossad has got its hands on copies of the Epstein files. And honestly, if Mossad's got it, then it's not impossible to imagine that the sort of GRU or FSB has somehow managed to get its hands on the Epstein data. Now, I'm not saying that that's what's happened. I'm not even saying that those hinted at. But if Russian intelligence services have seen or accessed or copied some of the supposed dirt on Trump, that's an extraordinarily powerful weapon.
absolutely, absolutely, Jonathan. It would be a powerful weapon. I don't know. It's a conspiracy theory, and if it really happened, I don't think it would be discussed among so many people. It would be more one on one. And by the way, one on one was scheduled, and everyone was expecting one on one conversation. But then they changed it 3 to 3. Well,
Yeah, didn't
was it
happen. Yeah,
yeah, 3 to 3, and then it didn't happen. It was another disappointment for a lot of American
yeah.
reporters. But boy, he certainly has used this opportunity to strengthen his image. I can say that he's back into the game of geopolitics. And then he didn't come back. He's brought back by the USA. Out of all countries we could think of, it's USA. Unbelievable. And I also don't think that it's his luck. I think it was a very engineered event, and it was a trap. And I don't know who on the Russian side was planning and executing, but they did a very good job.
Yes, yes. I mean, they may not be able to, coordinate on the battlefield, but they can certainly coordinate this kind of activity. And I mean, as I say, I mean, they did make some battlefield advances just before the summit, and this is again where it gets me with the media. The media are like, "Oh my goodness, Russia is advancing; they're having a huge breakthrough." Whereas you look on a map, it's an extraordinary advance along a kind of narrow corridor, which, if you think for 5 seconds about it, is completely unsupportable. They're stretching the logistics lines, they're punching through way beyond in narrow corridors that they could potentially defend. And yes, it causes a momentary problem, But as is entirely predictable, the Ukrainian forces managed to cut it off because it's not a militarily motivated attack. It's entirely a piece of political spin. People on the ground have been told take territory at any cost, knowing full well that they're not going to hold it for very long. They don't need to hold it for very long. They just need it for a couple of days. But I've gone back and looked at the Western media, and for the dozens and dozens and dozens of articles that talk about this huge breakthrough, which is not huge and it's not really a breakthrough, um, did any of the media go back and then create articles saying, actually, we're quite clearly this is a politically motivated, activity, and it's been reversed very quickly? No, there's no articles, none, except one or two in the Ukrainian press. So it's entirely disingenuous, and time after time after time, the media works in Russia's favor, which it's extraordinary. It's an extraordinary own goal. I don't think they're manipulated or controlled by Russia, um,
Mm,
but I think most of it's just sheer incompetence, unfortunately. But certainly, it works very much in Putin's favor.
have you heard the story of Alexander Isakov?
Don't think so.
Brilliant fellow, brilliant. An economist, analyst, reporter, brilliant guy. Worked for Bank Россия, that's Putin's bank. Kovalchuk family owns it. It's basically, they call it the wallet for Putin's clan.
Yep.
He worked at VTB, Bank VTB, as I believe he was the head of the investment part of VTB or something like that. And then in 2022, in July, he quit his job and he moved. Well, he was hired by Bloomberg.
Yes, no, I have heard of
And
that now. Yes, yes, I have.
yes, and then at first he was stationed in Dubai, and then he was moved to Washington, D.C., where he was the head of Bloomberg's division on study of Russia and the CIS. Well, obviously, it's very good knowledge of Russia and the CIS, right? And for 3 years, Alexander Isakov was reporting on how well Russian economy is doing. He was he didn't write articles, but he was supplying with certain data. And data is such a thing that you can turn it into different directions and to give a mood. And then Bloomberg is a very reputable media, and it was cited. The data was used. And then for 3 years, we were hearing, and we discussed it right here many times, that the
Mm,
Western media, fairly reputable newspapers, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and so forth, they were printing out articles on how Russian propaganda, I'm sorry, how Russian economy is circumventing the sanctions, how it was going strong, and so forth. They were baking up by some data. Um, and then in June, Alexander Osakov quit Bloomberg just like that, without explanation, without giving any reason, and disappeared to reappear a couple of weeks in Moscow. And he was hired, made um, the head of Sber's division that studies world economies trends. You know, basically a job about nothing.
mm,
Supplies Sber with different advices, economic advices. It's a nice safe harbor. Okay. So it just tells you that I'm pretty sure that the West is filled with Alexander the likes like Alexander Isakov. And, I don't think that the Western media is influenced, bribed, bought by Russian propaganda. No, but they use very smart ways to influence the media to speak it in the way they wanted to speak. I just give you one example. Nothing's been proven, but in my books, I mean, it looks very and smells very, very fishy. Okay, what happened to Bloomberg and Alexander Osakov? And I'm pretty sure that he started smelling smoke around him, and just like that, disappeared. Okay, so
Yes.
that's
And
why
there's many
you
more
are
where they
you are
come
not
from.
seeing articles like what happened after. They don't follow up. By the way, I just was sent an article printed in a very reputable UK media about Russian economy, and there's plenty of numbers there, and the numbers are wrong. And I'm going to take I'm going to do a video debunking this article. Tune in. That's
Mm.
another example. I'm pretty sure that the UK media is not paid by Russian propaganda, but someone is led to information, data, let's say from Россtat, and information comes from Россtat is a little cooked. Let's put it this way. Okay, and they take it, it's official from the Russian government and so forth, and they base their articles, researches on that data, and then they spread it all over the world, and then there you go, you have it. So
There's
I
been
think
some
that
odd stuff in Economist, Telegraph, Spectator, um, and sometimes I get the feeling some of it is politically inspired, maybe even informed by the intelligence services of some countries, or as you say, information packaged up, fed to them, which is actually not an informational project or product, but an intelligence product from someone or other. Or it's just terrible journalism, but sometimes it looks a little more conspired
sometimes both.
than that. Yeah, sometimes it's absolutely both. Well, I mean, any journalist that swallows an intelligence product and then regurgitates it is a pretty poor journalist anyway. There's two other bits I wanted to focus on because I know you're traveling. It's incredibly late, and I'm incredibly grateful to you for recording this at such a ungodly hour. Two more things. One is, of course, we've got it's all Alaska, 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 Alaska. But meanwhile, there's extraordinary things happening. So there's a certain deflection and distraction going on. You've got an extraordinary percentage of Russian refinery capacity taken out. You've got the Druzhba pipeline that has now been taken out, so that Hungary and Slovakia are squealing that they can no longer get their fix of hydrocarbons from Russia. I think that's very smart on the part of Ukraine. And of course, we're having more and more managers, apparatchiks, and oligarchs and minigarchs are meeting with extraordinary accidents, and it's speeding up as well. We're getting more and more of these happening week in, week out. But none of that's really being talked about. None of that's being covered. The chaos in the Russian economy, and the vertical of power, that's really not being talked about at all. It seems to me that it's Putin that has very few cards in real terms. And actually, Ukraine has a lot more than they're being credited with.
I agree. I think that he has very few cards. Um, he's got served the blow after blow, and the biggest blow is the economy, of course. I have a feeling that I started getting this feeling this summer. Uh, there is a ban on bad economic news in Russian propaganda. That there wasn't such a ban before, and now most media they try to avoid bad news. Okay, it just shows us that things are pretty darn bad. They don't want the bad news to be out there. Uh, I just can give you a couple things. For example, wheat harvest is terrible this year. No one is talking about it. Rostov province, number one producer of wheat, by the way. um, harvested 8 million ton of wheat this year, compared to 12 million last year and 16 million year before. Okay, a governor of Rostov province called for an emergency meeting, invited large farmers, and told them that it was going to ask Putin for financial aid to the farmers, for subsidies. And he actually followed through. He met with Putin a few days later, yesterday, and they not saying well, they just mentioning that there was a meeting between Rostov governor, interim governor, and Vladimir Putin. I'm pretty sure I know what they were talking about. He was reporting on the current state, not such great state of agriculture in one of the bread baskets of Russia, perhaps bread baskets of Europe as well, Rostov province. Um, Situation in real estate is not that grand either. About 20% of developers are near bankruptcy, and the largest developer Samoilov, the owner of Samoilov, was looking to sell the company for a long time, and is 57 years old. He mysteriously died yesterday. No details of his death have been released so far. Okay. Um, Russian gas, gasoline. My estimate, about 10% of oil refinement capabilities of Russia have been put out of service by the Ukrainian strikes in the last 6 weeks or so. There's been an incredible wave of drone attacks, the latest in Volgograd. And I personally know, I've been to Volgograd's oil refinery. We tried to help build it probably 15 years ago. So, state of the art. It's some of it, one part of it is out of commission right now. 10%, Jonathan, 10% of, or close to 10% of all um, gasoline, diesel, refined in Russia has been out of commission. 10%.
Huge,
In
absolutely huge.
Crimea, in a couple other provinces, they've introduced ratios to on the gas stations. You cannot buy a certain amount of more than a certain amount of gas. At some gas stations, they sell only to businesses. They don't sell to people. Gas. I've seen that before in the USSR in the late 80s. Oh yeah, I heard that music. Okay, and the price of gas is skyrocketing. The government is taking the extraordinary measures to control the situation, but they can't really. They have put a ban on exporting all kinds of refined oil products. That gas, heating oil, diesel fuel. So the absolute ban. Now everything must be sold inside Russia. It's hurting the refineries, oil companies, but you know what? They've introduced price control of certain products at the gas stations. Now there are reports, unconfirmed. Don't quote me on them, but that's what I heard recently. That some gas stations sell gasoline at loss, 1 ruble loss. Okay, ruble and a half loss. That's not gonna last for a long time. I can tell you that. Um, there's a full blown crisis. But if you look at Russian media, Russian propaganda, you will see bits, pieces and bits of troubles, but nothing extraordinary. Okay, life as usual. Yes, there's conflict in Ukraine somewhere. It's happening. We can't deny it. That's far away. It's not a big deal. Yeah, there've been a couple strikes on the oil refineries, but this life as usual. Let's talk about this SAP board festival that is taking place in St. Petersburg. There are so many people. There are like 400 SAPs on Neva River right now this past weekend. Let's talk about that, or let's talk about Flower Festival at VDNH in Moscow. That's what's important. Not your strikes, things like that. So there's been an incredible pressure to hide the troubles in the Russian economy, but well, I certainly understand what's going on. Cart house is fallen down. That's pretty much what I can say about the current state of Russian economy. It's fallen down. That's what I'm going to be
And
doing
we're
tomorrow. Talking about it in Wednesday economic weekly review. I do it every Wednesday, and I'll have plenty of facts, numbers, figures, and events there.
That's fantastic. And of course, people are watching this on Thursday. If they didn't catch your Wednesday stream, I strongly advise them when they finish this video to go back and watch your update on the numbers there. And of course, catch it every week. We're, of course, going to be here to report these house of falling cards as they tumble one by one. I'm convinced they are. I'm also convinced that what Trump has done is given Putin even more rope to hang himself. This is what Putin's taught himself into being able to continue his aggression without consequences. But what it really does is it makes him able to avoid the consequences of actions. It means he just has to, he can defer any decision about the war. And therefore, when the crisis does come, it's going to be far, far bigger and worse and completely unmanageable when it does. So Putin's success at Alaska, I think, is going to rebound negatively when all of these, economic chickens come home to roost.
Pierce victory.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, I agree with that. I agree that, Jonathan, my point of view hasn't changed for years. I've said that I believe that the victory for Ukraine will not come from the front lines. Instead, it will come from inside Russia. The pie will shrink so much that it is going to affect Russian power clans, power groups a lot, and sooner or later they will act.
I think there are
So
many people in Ukraine, including in the government, who now understand that getting Crimea back under their control, getting Donbass back under control, the only way is, as you say, through some kind of economic collapse in Russia or a collapse in the ability to sustain the army. And I believe that's what's going to happen. But
don't
we'll
have to
be
wait
there.
long. Don't
We
have to
don't have
wait
to
long.
wait
It's
that long.
happening right there, in front of our eyes. And we've been waiting for this moment for 3.5 years. Okay, and then I know a lot of people are saying, "Well, look, Russian economy went strong for so long." Well, yes, it did, but it used up all the resources, and that's in the worst shape, I'd say, ever. So we are seeing it collapsing right in front of our eyes. Mark my words, fall, this coming fall, will be full of events, and it's going to be very interesting.
We'll be there to help Western audiences analyze it because, unfortunately, they're not getting the full picture from their mainstream media. They're getting a distorted view. They're not even getting many of these stories. So I think it's important that we carry on doing this, and we pledge to the audience that we will do. Konstantin, for today, though, this was fantastic. Always a thrill. I think today, especially, we've covered some really important ground, and I'm very grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Until the next time.